Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adrian. Today we are going to be doing a top 10 list, everyone's favourite. And this is going to be my top 10 favourite characters in fantasy. So of the books I have read, what are my top 10 favourite characters? Now there's a few caveats to this. So one is I've only picked one character from each series of books. So from a series of books, I've only allowed myself one character, the best character from those books, in my opinion, or my favourite, possibly not the best, but certainly my favourite character in those book series. So that's something to be aware of. As well as that, I have basically gone for modern fantasy here. It does mean that there is no Samwise Gamgee on this list, but we all know that I love Sam. He is brilliant, no matter what Alan says. Jumping straight in then at number 10. Number 10, this is from The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. Everyone knows my favourite greatcoat is Basti Goodbow. Basti is wonderful. He is hilarious. Book 2, Night's Shadow, is not the best book in the series, but is Brasti's book, and I love it for that reason. He is absolutely hilarious, and he only gets funnier through the series. Let's give some honourable mentions here to Falkio and Kest, his partners in crime, or in not crime, as the case may be. Basti works so well because of those other characters, and they work so well because of him. So I don't want to underplay that, but yeah, Basti is just funny and an absolute joy to read. Not much more to say there. He's just an absolutely wonderful character to read, and absolutely cracked me up more and more as we went through the Greatcoats series. In at number 9 is a character from a book that I'm sure many of you haven't read. This is from The Lions of al-Rassan by Guy Gavriel Kay, and this character is Rodrigo Belmonte. I think he is an exceptionally well-drawn character. I love his relationships that we get through this book, whether it's with his family, whether it's with our main character, whether it's with some of the other secondary characters, the relationships that he builds. I think Rodrigo is done very, very well. And he is a character who I can kind of really empathise with. He's a family man who has a job to do, has to do certain things, and finds himself in new relationships, new friendships, and I think that's done incredibly well. I will say that there is an honourable mention for this book as well in Imar Ibn Khayan. I've probably pronounced that terribly, and that's fine. But both of these guys are so well drawn, very likeably written, and written in ways that they are really understandable. And I think that is one of Guy Gavriel Kay's strengths, along with wonderful prose. So for those of you who have read Lions of al-Rassan, you will hopefully understand why I have put Rodrigo in here. Moving on to number 8 is not a character who is necessarily the greatest character in fiction. I don't think he's got the most interesting conflict, but he's just a character that I love and I would love to be friends with. This is Raoden from Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Now, Raoden is sort of one of those characters. He's very positive. He is relentlessly optimistic, like painfully optimistic at times. No matter what is going on, no matter how terrible the circumstances or the situation, he is relentlessly positive and optimistic, and he is going to work as best he can to cause this situation to go as well as possible, to help the most people he can as best he can, no matter how dire the situation. I don't think he's super deep or got the best conflict as a character, but I just love how overwhelmingly positive he is, and how he's just striving to be the best he can be at all points. And I find that a really encouraging and inspiring character trait that Brandon has written into this character, into Raoden. In at number 7 is another Brandon Sanderson character, and this is from Warbreaker. Now, there are multiple characters I really, really like in Warbreaker. A special shout out to Vivenna and Ciri, who I think are done very well and portrayed very interestingly as a sister relationship, and as they both change and evolve throughout the story. But my favourite character, you might start to see a theme here with the comic relief characters, is Lightsong. I absolutely adore Lightsong. For those of you who haven't read Rawbreaker, Lightsong is a god. He is a god within this court of gods, but he is a god who doesn't really believe in gods. He's sort of an atheist. As such, he is the god of bravery, and he doesn't really see himself as a god. He doesn't really get why he needs to do these things. He is constantly ripping his priests about his godhood. And yeah, his divinity, and I just think he's very funny. He's a very, very likable character who, again, a bit like Brasti, is just funny, has good moments of humour, and is interesting in the fact that he is trying to discover more about himself. He's trying to understand why he's been put in this situation as a deity, and working out how he can do the best for his city, even though he constantly plays it off as something he just doesn't care about. Yet we do see the good side of him, and we see why he wants to help as best he can, even though he continually tells people that he just does not care. And that is always a likable character we have as they evolve and as they grow into these things that they so often say they don't want to do. We then move on to number 6. Now, number 6 was really hard for me, because this is from a series of books that is my favourite series, and it's from a series of books where the character arcs are absolutely incredible. I absolutely love the character arcs that we go through in The Wheel of Time. Now, that doesn't mean I love all the characters, but I love the way that they progress. I love the way that they change and evolve and become different people because of the things that they experience, which makes absolute sense considering the stuff that is happening in that series, the life-changing events that go on. These characters should change, they should evolve. And it takes 15 books to do that, but it does do that really, really well. So honourable mention for basically the entire cast of Wheel of Time, but who I am putting in here at number 6 is Nynaeve Almera. I love Nynaeve. I know there are a lot of Nynaeve haters out there, and I can absolutely understand that. For those of you who are a few books into the series, yes, you can be a Nynaeve hater, and that's fine, that's probably fair, but the arc she goes through, the way she grows up, the way she matures is just wonderful, and I really love the way that she does that. I love how incredibly well she changes and adapts, how she grows up, because she is older than some of the other main characters in The Wheel of Time, so she should be more mature than them anyway, only by a few years. But the way she matures and grows and understands the ways of the world so much better, it feels like how I was as a 19, 20-year-old compared to how I am now as a nearly 30-year-old. I feel like I have grown and I am less black and white. My views are more nuanced. I have more empathy and understanding. I'm less quick to go to a snap judgment. And I think the way that Nynaeve grows up and matures is just done really, really, really wonderfully in this series. Obviously a shout out to Matt and Perrin and Rand Egwene as well. Just wonderful character work from Robert Jordan throughout this entire series. Moving on to our top 5 now. Number 5 is from a series that I know a lot of people haven't read, and this is from the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. I know this is not super easily accessible in the US. If you're in the UK, it is much more easily accessible. And this is Tormolin the Oathless. Now, he is an Aboran. These are sort of the Winnowing Flames is like their elf stand-in, but they don't want to be called elves because they've got some other things going on with them as well. They're sort of vampiric elves. But Tormolin is part of a dying society, and as you can tell from the name Tormolin the Oathless, he has abandoned this society, and he is trying to make his way in this world. In lots of ways, he starts out as a destitute character, a character who hasn't got anything to live for. We soon discover he does have things to live for, and again builds wonderful character relationships with many other characters in this series. But Tor, for me, is the pinnacle of it, and I think the way Jen Williams writes his arc, and particularly towards the end of this series, just broke me. Like, I'm not sure I'm ever going to forgive Jen Williams for how she ended this series, and that's in a good way. Like, it's not what I wanted, it's not what I expected, but it hurt, and if it hurts, that means I really care. It means I cared about what happened here, and I absolutely adore how Jen Williams has written Tor throughout this whole trilogy. So Tormund the Oathless, an absolutely wonderful fantasy character. In at number 4 on this list is going to be the last entry from Brandon Sanderson, and this is from his magnum opus, the Stormlight Archive, and the best character from this, in my opinion, is Dalinar Kholin. I really love Dalinar's journey. I love where he comes from and where he goes. I love the flashbacks we get in Oathbringer. I think that is done incredibly well. If you want to make a character with a horrific backstory still empathetic and likable, go talk to Brandon Sanderson, because this is how you do it. Done incredibly, incredibly well. And something a bit like the writing of Raoden, something about Dalinar really resonates with me. This idea of wanting to always improve, wanting to continue to get better, not let the way you have been in the past weigh you down. The fact that the most important step a man can take is always the next one. It's always the next one. And he says the quote that hits me most, the most hard-hitting quote I have read in a fantasy book, and it's this. He says, "Sometimes a hypocrite is just a man in the process of changing." Sometimes a hypocrite is just a man in the process of changing. How good is that for a quote? If we all lived our lives by that mantra, this world will be a much, much, much better place. Dalinar Kholin, I love you, and I cannot wait to see where you go in the rest of the Stormlight Archive. In at number 3 is from one of my other favourite series of all time. This is from the Long Price Quartet, and firstly an honourable mention from the series. So the series is by Daniel Abraham. Firstly, honourable mention, Matty. I love Matty. I think he is a horrifically flawed yet wonderful character. I think he is written so well. He feels like a real person, a real man that you would engage with in everyday life. So often his story is tragic, but so wonderful. I said this before, and probably have stolen it from Alan over at the Library of Alexandria, that this is Shakespearean in its tragedy. It is such a wonderful, wonderful series. But the man who's actually got to come in on this list at number 3 is Ota Machi. Ota is the yin to Marty's yang. They are friends and colleagues and co-workers and rivals, and there is so much going on between these two, and in so many ways the Long Price Quartet is the story of their relationship as they grow up. For me, Ota is super empathetic. I completely get where he's coming from so often, whether he is trying to shirk responsibility or take responsibility. I think that the whole of The Price of Spring book 4, no spoilers here, but the way he is in that is just incredible, and I understand it. And some of the final scenes of this series involving Ota and what happens with him are heartbreaking. Like, they are satisfactory in their heartbreak. You don't feel cheated, you don't feel unresolved, you just feel it's wonderfully done. Daniel Abraham is an absolute master at writing these emotional scenes, and one of the big things about the series is it's not that many pages for a 4-book series, but it covers a whole lifespan essentially, and I feel like I know Ota so well, and it's just an incredible character arc. In at number 2, talking about characters that we know so well, it's Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Here we know Harry so well because we have a first-person point of view. We are riding along in Harry's skull, and along with that we have had 17 books of riding along in Harry's skull. I feel like he is a friend. He feels like someone who I know so well. He's just drawn so well. Now, he starts out as this noir, sexist, chivalrous character who is, a bit of a smart ass, and really like that anyway. I think that's done very interestingly in this more noir feeling start to the series. But as the series evolves, as Harry evolves, we learn more and more about him. We understand his motivations so much better. We understand his need for family. And there is a moment in book 12 changes that I really understand Harry, and I am heartbroken. Well, actually, there are multiple things that happen in that book where I understand where Harry is coming from, and I am heartbroken for him. I cannot think of a book that I've listened to that has made me so sad and so tearful as listening to Changes. James Masters absolutely nails this. James Masters is Harry Dresden for me, but it's just done so well, and you can't help but feel for the guy. And yet he still makes poor decisions, and he still makes me want to slap him sometimes. Jim Butcher just has got this character down, and he's going to be a favourite for me in fantasy for a long, long time to come. And in at number 1, my favourite character in fantasy might surprise you slightly, and that's because he is a very much secondary character from The Faithful and the Fallen. Now, I don't want to ruin The Faithful and the Fallen for you if you haven't read it by John Gwynne, but I'm not going to say too much about this character. But if you haven't read book 1, there might be some very, very light spoilers here. You might be able to infer some things, but I'm not telling you what's happening, okay? So this is Macin, or Macwin, or however you want to say his name. I love Macin. I think he is such a good character. We don't really see much of him in book 1, but we get a lot more of him in books 2, 3, and 4. And for me, his story is what most gripped me through The Faithful and the Fallen. There was a lot of things going on, lots of plot going on in The Faithful and the Fallen. But for me, Macin's storyline was the most gripping and compelling. And for many reasons, it's because it was the most personal. Now, I have never read a revenge story that I have felt so invested in. I think the combination of revenge and romance is intertwined insanely well for Macin. I think John Gwynne does such an amazing job for that. There is a moment where we think that all is lost, as we often get in these kind of stories. And that moment where Macin stands up again and goes forward and says that there are 3 reasons he wants to live. Yeah, there are 3 things that he is living for. And once they are done, he doesn't need to live anymore. There are 3 things he is living for. And that moment is so heartbreaking, but so inspiring. It's just done incredibly well. And as he goes through these 3 things, there is just so much hatred I feel for people who have wronged him, and so much love and respect I feel for him as a man. And I just can't explain to you how wonderful Macin is as a character, even though we get so little relative page time with him throughout The Faithful and the Fallen. I don't think there is any character written better than Macin in The Faithful and the Fallen, and he is my favourite character in the entirety of fantasy. And that tells you how much I love this man and how he is written. I hope that's been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed seeing my top 10 fantasy characters for me, my favourites. If you've enjoyed the video, click the like button. If you want to see more of the content, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.